Some of you requested I talk about cancel culture in a dedicated video, so your wish is my command. Here's the short answer on the question if cancel culture is real. Yes. Now I guess I'll need to elaborate and explore the issue through a few questions, as I like to explore and analyze these issues. What is canceling? As I'm a bit of a boomer in spirit and I want to help out my fellow boomers and boomers at heart, I'm going to need to start with some context. What is canceling? Canceling is a specific kind of public shaming, mostly done online, and it consists of calling people out publicly and calling for a boycott and deplatforming of the individual. And not just a financial boycott, where you don't buy anything from them, but an emotional and cultural boycott too, where you don't support them at all, be it watching their videos or following them on social media. The term cancel culture originated in the late 2000s, but the act of a cultural boycott and shunning of a person for doing something wrong has existed since the beginning of humanity. Later in the video, we'll go through some specific examples of notable cancelings throughout history. Why do people cancel? Simply put, people withdraw their support of someone because they don't approve of them, and there are different severities. Not every call to cancel someone is over something egregious. Could be something really bad, like the person harming someone, being an abuser, having really bad political views, or doing something hateful, or it can be over a complete misunderstanding, like a joke that someone took a little too seriously, or took a lot of offense to. Motivations? Sometimes people have good motivations for canceling, like they genuinely care about social justice issues, they want to look out for people in their community, or they don't want to give their money to a bad person. But there are bad motivations too behind canceling. Jealousy, bitterness, sabotaging someone's career, and getting on your high horse about canceling someone for clout. Overall, I think that cancel culture, while it can do some good, and there comes a point where some people deserve to be cancelled, I think that it's done more harm, and it's really just vigilante justice and getting revenge, not restorative justice. Isn't the real progressive goal to get the person who hurt you to understand the impact of their actions and truly apologize and make amends? All of which will make the world a better place. We need to love one another, not hate and constantly be out to get one another. Who participates in cancel culture? I'm gonna upset people with this spicy take, but both the left and the right participate in cancel culture. Even I've contributed to it, both in canceling someone and being cancelled myself. Both sides will happily criticize the other side on how they get all cancel happy, but ignore the cancellings that have happened on their side. On this channel, I take an honest look at my side and other sides. Sure, I have my biases as a leftist, but I think the best thing that we can do for our political side is to be critical and aware of our flaws and improve. Never be complacent, never be stagnant. Let's start with left-wing cancel culture, where leftists most often cancel right-wingers and bigots, which is justified, but it can quickly turn into, well, this person said something I don't like and I slightly disagree with, or they made a joke that I found tasteless, so burn the witch. One notable example of a justified cancelling is Amy Cooper, aka Central Park Karen, the dog walker in Central Park who called the police on a black man, Christian Cooper, no relation, telling her to put her dog on a lead in the park. She went into hysterics, choked her dog, and called the police, lying about Mr. Cooper being a threat to her. This could have ended in death for Christian. All for nothing. She's a modern-day Carolyn Bryant, basically. She ended up losing her job from this, and now people can't Google Amy Cooper without seeing this situation. You also have similar stories like this, like Barbecue Becky and Permit Patty. If you're more of a pop culture beauty guru kind of person and need an example of justified cancel culture, look no further than Dramageddon 3, which led to the cancellations of the previously thought to be untouchable Jeffree Star and Shane Dawson. In short, both participated in a lot of racist behavior. Shane doing blackface and Jeffree using racial slurs for a variety of different groups, even up until this year. On top of that, both of their target audiences are kids and teens, yet both have done predatory things. I won't go into detail, but you can find videos on it. D'Angelo Wallace made complete videos on the whole situation, breaking down what each person did wrong. Jeffree Star, all around, is a bad person who treats his diehard fans and his friends like crap. There are plenty of other makeup brands to support besides his. But for all these cases that are justified, like Central Park Karen, Barbecue Becky, and Permit Patty, you have ones where the situation is way overblown, and I will outline all of the ones on the left, the center, and the right. Monica Lewinsky. We all know this one, but she isn't necessarily a right-wing or left-wing cancel culture. Everyone basically cancelled her. She's an example of cancel culture before the term cancel culture. For any Zoomers in the audience who this is before their time, she was an intern for President Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was far from the first president to cheat on his wife while in office, But what made this different from previous presidents who had affairs is that there were tabloids and celebrity gossip shows on cable TV by the 90s. Monica Lewinsky got called a tramp, a whore, a homewrecker, bimbo, slut. But Bill Clinton? He wasn't called any of those things. This is misogyny. Why does the other woman get all the blame in cheating? At the end of the day, the Clintons still have their money and influence, and while Bill Clinton is the bad guy for cheating on his wife and using his power, Monica Lewinsky got screwed over. She had to go into hiding, her face was plastered all over the internet, making her one of the first to be cancelled and publicly shamed through the internet. She was the butt of jokes for a decade or even more, lost her reputation and dignity, suffered from mental health problems, didn't give a public talk until 2014, and her 20s and 30s were lost to the scandal. She did a great TED Talk in 2015 on this, and I highly recommend you listen to it. People who participate in cancel culture often forget that there is a person behind the scandal. People are not two-dimensional. They have feelings, emotions, wishes, desires, ambitions. People aren't perfect and should be given the room to grow and change. Justine Sacco. She was prominently featured in Jon Ronson's So You've Been Publicly Shamed. She was a South African immigrant to the US who worked in PR. She went from being a private individual with a very good job to cancelled overnight over a joke. She had a few hundred followers on her personal Twitter and liked to make jokes, but one joke went over the line with people, and it was this one. Going to Africa. Hope I don't get AIDS. Just kidding. I'm white. She tweeted this just before her flight from London to Cape Town took off. She was asleep on the plane with no idea that she was in hot water. During the flight, people tweeted, "Has Justine landed? Where's Justine? Justine is disgusting. How did she get a PR job?" The hashtag, "Has Justine landed yet?" was the top trend worldwide. When the plane landed, people gathered at the airport and took pictures of her. This is a textbook example of disproportionate reaction. The joke was very tongue-in-cheek, and I assume in South Africa the sense of humor isn't exactly like in the US. She was making fun of white people who go to Africa and think that they're going to get AIDS. She's South African herself, and that's something that news stations failed to report. A key omission. No nuance in coverage, just public shaming and vigilante pile-ons. This situation created a chilling effect where people are afraid to make jokes online or even express themselves. She lost her job, and the scandal ruined her dating life. In the end, she got lucky and got her job back about 5 years later. Sure, she can laugh about it now, but it wasn't fun going through it at the time, and even to this day. Everyone knows about the scandal when Googling her name, and people will have their questions. Johnny Depp, the victim of a false accusation. People were very quick to believe Amber Heard because of the mantra, "Believe all women." Here's basically the story. Johnny Depp met Amber Heard on the set of The Rum Diary. They started dating after Johnny Depp broke up with Vanessa Paradis. They got married a few years later, and their marriage was turbulent. Amber Heard filed for divorce and got a restraining order against Johnny Depp, claiming that he was physically and verbally abusive towards her. When this news about Johnny Depp allegedly abusing Amber Heard came out, people were very quick to jump on the Johnny Depp hate train because why would a woman lie? And so he got cancelled. He gave her $7 million, lost out on acting jobs, and his reputation was shot. And meanwhile, she got a platform to speak and wrote a defamatory op-ed in the Washington Post. Everyone acted like Amber Heard is this innocent angel and victim. It wasn't until early this year that it was revealed to all of us what Amber Heard's true nature really was, that she was the one physically and emotionally abusing Johnny Depp. When these false accusations happen, the damage is already done. There will always be people who will have their doubts of the exoneration. Movie studios may not find it safe to work with Johnny Depp, and it's hard to bounce back from something like this. Meanwhile, Amber Heard is still getting acting jobs, and she still has not been fired from Aquaman. Justice Democrats, Cenk Uygur. People change over time, and I hate that people cannot recognize that. The Justice Democrats are a progressive pack that was started by Kyle Kulinski and Cenk Uygur, and two leaders of Bernie's 2016 presidential campaign, with the goal of getting more progressives into Congress, because the presidency isn't the only battle, and arguably Congress is more important in many ways. Back in 2017, you would see both of them plugging Justice Democrats. No doubt were the Justice Democrats instrumental in changing Congress and getting rising stars like Ilhan Omar, AOC, and Rashida Tlaib to Washington to advocate for progressive policies. However, There were some negatives, and the group fell into that woke scold cancel culture that pervades the left. What happened? Basically, the Young Turks' outspoken founder, Cenk Uygur, once upon a time was a Republican and wrote these sexist blog posts in the late 90s and early 2000s. He has since deleted those posts, but Internet Archive is a thing, and someone uncovered this. Since then, he had changed his views and became more progressive, and love him or hate him, he's not a sexist anymore. He's made an apology and was ousted from the group because they thought he would be detrimental to the movement, even though the Young Turks are a popular news show on the internet. This is an out of proportion response to something that happened a long time ago. Cenk has changed and apologized, and this is what he gets? Being kicked out of an organization he founded? Why do the left infight so much? At some point, this all gets so stupid. I get holding people accountable and wanting them to grow and change and be better people. But how does that happen when they get cancelled over small stuff that happened so long ago? These purity tests are like a field of lasers. Bernie with Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is the most popular podcaster, and he doesn't like establishment Democrats or Republicans. People on both sides have their ideas of him, like he's this big bad conservative, un-PC guy and a douchebag. Honestly though, if you get off the internet and actually talk to people, you'll find that normies don't care about the culture war and PC culture. Joe Rogan is a lot like your average, not-so-online normie. Joe Rogan is a guy who is open-minded and willing to learn, and he's had Bernie, Tulsi, and Andrew Yang on the podcast. Other candidates beg to be on the podcast, but Joe Rogan has the luxury of turning them down, and so he did. Because who wants to listen to establishment Democrats? If you want that, there are plenty of platforms for that, like CNN and MSNBC. A lot of people on the left believe in guilt by association and will whinge when someone goes on a show of someone they don't like. You go on Fox News, why are you talking to the enemy? Even though Joe Rogan is nothing like Tucker Carlson, people got mad at left-wing candidates who went on Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan endorsed Bernie Sanders, and of course Bernie Sanders' campaign showed it off. He's the most popular podcaster. After that, AOC backed away from Bernie's campaign and refused to publicly campaign for him when he needed it the most. And it's almost certainly because of that Joe Rogan endorsement, according to my conspiracy theory. Had AOC gone out and aggressively campaigned for Bernie, would we have seen Bernie winning the primary? I don't know. What did Joe Rogan do that was so bad? Tell transphobic jokes, which a lot of comedians have done. Fast forward a few months and AOC fully supports Joe Biden and his pick for VP, Kamala Harris, who refused to allow trans inmates to transition and would put trans women in men's prisons. Tell me which is more transphobic and actually hurts trans people's material well-being more. A person making a joke but will fight for your rights? Or a person who will deny your rights but act all PC in public and not make any jokes that push the envelope? Fuck civility politics. Did she expect Bernie to disavow him? Sometimes people you disagree with, a lot, have good things to say. Stop with the tribalism. AOC often has great things to say, and is the progressive gateway for the normie suburban liberals. And I agree a lot with her politics, but like Kyle Kulinski says, she gets too caught up in the culture war. Contrapoints. BreadTube are known for eating their own, and what's a notable example of that? Natalie, aka ContraPoints. She's being cancelled for speaking about her own experiences as a trans woman and for having a persona non grata in her video. Basically, in one video, she collaborated with some other trans YouTubers and one trans public figure who's considered controversial, and that guy is Buck Angel. I believe it was someone working for her who thought to pick Buck Angel because he sounded a lot like John Waters and he was reading a John Waters quote. What the person working for Natalie didn't realize, though, is that Buck Angel is a controversial figure who has some outdated views about the trans community. In the video, Buck Angel didn't say anything offensive, but the cancel crowd came for Natalie with their pitchforks, calling her transphobic, true scum, disgusting, all because of guilt by association. She never said she agreed with Buck Angel, just that he had a voiceover cameo in a video. She also got cancelled for sharing her opinions on pronoun introductions being normalized. I agree with her that pronoun introductions make sense in an LGBT context, like if you're in an LGBT support group, but outside of that context, it makes less sense. A lot of trans people want to integrate and not stand out and be made to feel like a burden or that people need to walk on eggshells around them. Asking someone's pronouns makes the person feel like they're being outed. 99% of the time, you're going to get someone's pronouns right, unless the person is very androgynous or early on in their transition. Natalie feels that when people ask for her pronouns, it's implying that she doesn't pass. People came for her and called her privileged and saying that she benefits from passing privilege and that she's speaking over non-binary people. Odd, because she used to identify as non-binary. Point is, allow people from marginalized groups to speak honestly and frankly about their experiences, even if it's different from yours. Alex Morse. Alex Morse is the mayor of Holyoke, Massachusetts, and was running for Congress in the 1st Congressional District, primarying corporate Democrat incumbent Richard Neal. Alex Morse is openly gay and young, and worked as an instructor at University of Massachusetts Amherst. He was single, and this being 2020 and not 1960, how do you find a boyfriend? You online date, of course. So he used Tinder and Grindr to find a boyfriend. Being in a university town, a lot of the people he contacted were university students, but they weren't his own students. He would often have friendly chats with the men that he messaged. Fast forward to August this year, and the smear campaign orchestrated by the college Democrats comes out, and they're falsely accusing Alex Morse of hitting on men without consent and having relations with students from his classes. Some of the men messaging him were baiting him and using him in a sting operation to smear him later on, a premeditated campaign that was going on for a year to help keep the incumbent Neal in office. These guys would slide into Morse's DMs, and in exchange for that, they would get internships with Neal in exchange for their work in defeating his challenger. The Democrats claim to be the party that stands up for LGBT rights, but in this case, they're using homophobic tropes to smear him as a predator and a creep, appealing to homophobic narratives about the sex lives of gay men. What consequences did Alex Morse face? He was disinvited from future events on campus, and his contract with the university ended, so he couldn't be rehired. The local Sunrise Movement chapter retracted their endorsement. The college Democrats and Richard Neal's campaign deny any wrongdoing. Progressives, too, even cancelled him. Progressives are very quick to jump on the Me Too train, and we need to stop for a second and investigate allegations, instead of jumping to a conclusion. Due process is important. In the end, Alex Morse lost the primary, even though he was sort of redeemed, with cancel culture and false accusations. Even though the allegations are proven to be false and smear tactics, there's always going to be that bit of doubt that makes people wonder if they actually did do it, and if they really deserved cancellation. There is no bouncing back and coming out without a scratch or a bump. Now that we've talked enough about left-wing cancel culture, let's talk about cancel culture on the right. Bari Weiss. Bari Weiss is an opinion writer who has worked at the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. She claims to be a left-leaning centrist, but she's really more of a neocon. Regardless, this is a good segue into talking about the right and their cancel culture. She was hired by the New York Times in 2017 to broaden their ideological range. Haha, what a joke. Do they even have socialist or Marxist opinion writers? No. She's known for being extremely pro-Israel, writing a book called How to Fight Anti-Semitism. I don't endorse anything she does, and me as a former Jew, I don't even know or claim her. Like a lot of right-wingers, she's a hypocrite on things, and one of those things is cancel culture. She will criticize cancel culture on the left, but it's okay when the right does it, like when she cancels anyone who is pro-Palestine or supports boycott, divestment, sanctions. At Columbia, she accused several Arab American professors who were critical of Israel of anti-Semitism. Funny how she was hired at the New York Times for expanding ideological diversity, even though she's against it when it comes to universities. Just because someone criticizes Israel's government doesn't make them an anti-Semite. It's actually anti-Semitic to equate Jewish people to Israel. She's claimed that NYU is anti-Semitic for the student government passing a BDS resolution and the school awarding the President's Service Award to a pro-Palestine society on campus. Free speech for me, but not for thee, I guess. She has compared the work of Jewish-American political cartoonist Eli Valley to Nazi propaganda. She's accused Keith Ellison of having a history of defending and working with anti-Semites. She also tried to cancel Tulsi Gabbard last year for being anti-war. This year, she left the New York Times, making herself out to be the victim of cancel culture. What was the cause of her resignation? Supporting the publishing of Senator Tom Cotton's op-ed, where he supports the use of military force against citizens participating in protests for racial justice. Meanwhile, her colleagues said that publishing that op-ed would be irresponsible because it would endanger the lives of non-white and mixed people and journalists. She claims that she is being cancelled because of wrongthink, and that she was bullied at the New York Times. That's right, she quits and claims to be the victim. She cancelled herself. What an idiot. McCarthyism and Hollywood blacklist. Now let's look at an old school example of cancel culture. After World War II came the Cold War and the Red Scare. America is not a good place to be a communist, despite Americans proclaiming how free it is. I guess they have selective vision, because if you were a communist or even supported their right to speak and organize, you would be cancelled. Anti-communist propaganda was all over the place. Just a little history and context before we talk about McCarthyism and the Hollywood blacklist. Just after World War I, there was a first Red Scare because, well, there was a revolution in Russia, and workers were fighting for their rights and organizing and starting unions. The Communist Party of the United States had a momentum and were growing their membership. During World War II, the US and Soviet Union were working together to beat the Nazis, so anti-communist sentiment wasn't as high, but it would begin again after the war. A 1947 executive order by Harry S. Truman that required loyalty screenings for all federal civil service employees. Meanwhile in China, the CCP, led by Mao Zedong, took over. Communism was growing worldwide, and then you had the Korean War that tore apart the Korean peninsula. The Soviets and the Chinese allied with the North, and the US allied with the South. The government were cracking down on spies because of the Soviets testing an atomic bomb. More conservatives got into Congress and they called any progressive reforms communist. I mean, where do you think today's Republicans get that tactic from? Senator Joseph McCarthy from Wisconsin had a list of suspected communists and started a whole witch hunt, conducting House Un-American Activities Committee hearings. Yes, that's right. If you are a communist or support their rights to free speech, you're considered a traitor and un-American. If you were accused, you were blacklisted and there were social and career consequences. Connected to that era was the Hollywood blacklist. Cracking down on suspected communists and sympathizers was not just happening in the government, but also in Hollywood. I mean, they're entertainers. How are they a threat? The FBI had lots of files on entertainers because they like to waste their time on pointless crap like that. I mean, think of that whole scandal with Louis in the 60s. Similar to McCarthyism, you get accused of being a member of the Communist Party, or you refuse to assist congressional investigations into the party's activities and you lose your status in Hollywood. No work for you. In a decade, hundreds of actors, directors, screenwriters, producers, animators, and musicians were blacklisted. The Hollywood 10 didn't only get blacklisted, they got jail sentences too. The blacklist would not end until the 1960s. Muhammad Ali. No introduction is needed for the greatest. A lot of people know him for his boxing career, but he was also an activist and a prominent anti-Vietnam War voice. Being born in the early 40s and there being a draft, it meant that he would be drafted. He did the brave thing of refusing to be drafted because of his religious views, which included pacifism. America has this very backward system, and still does, called selective service, where all men need to register by 18, or else they cannot get student aid or a government job, among other things. Women do not need to register for the draft. This is a real men's rights issue, and something I haven't seen feminists talk about enough. In 1967, Muhammad Ali went to Houston for his scheduled induction into the military. But he refused to step forward, and he was told he was committing a felony. He was arrested, and as a result, his boxing license was suspended, and he was stripped of his title. During his late 20s, which is a part of your prime as an athlete, he couldn't box in any state. He went to court and was convicted of refusing the draft. He was monitored by the NSA and FBI like many other anti-war activists. He took his conviction to the Supreme Court, and his conviction was reversed in 1971. In the meantime, when he couldn't box, he spoke at universities all over the United States. He started boxing again in the 70s and showed the world that he was the greatest, and 3 years of exile couldn't stop him. Angela Davis. Angela Davis is a Marxist activist, philosopher, and academic. She belonged to the Communist Party from the 60s until 1991 and wrote a lot of books about class, feminism, and the prison industrial complex. Having such far-left views in America wasn't popular, and not a lot of people would stand with you. Certainly not the conservatives or the liberals. Liberals might support some of what you say in theory, but they will say that your revolutionary approach is going too far. In 1969, she worked as a professor at UCLA while being affiliated with the Communist Party and the Black Panther Party. When the university found out about these affiliations, she was fired, and so began the legal battle. A judge ruled that she couldn't be fired for her affiliation, and she got her position back. But not for long, because UCLA really wanted to get rid of her, and tried to find a way to fire her legally, so they found an excuse, using inflammatory language and speeches not in her classes. Some beacon of free speech public universities are. Dixie Chicks. Here's a more recent case that older millennials will remember. The Dixie Chicks, now known as the Chicks, are an all-girl country group from Texas who stand out in their genre because they're very outspoken liberals. Always have been that way, and I have no idea why some country fans aren't aware of this. Anyway, they were cancelled during the Bush years, a very conservative, patriotic, jingoistic time in America. If you questioned anything America did, people would look down upon you. It wasn't easy being a pacifist. The media lied to us all and fooled a lot of people into thinking there were WMDs in Iraq. Anyway, it seemed like everyone was supporting the Iraq War, but you know who didn't? The Dixie Chicks. They called out George Bush at a concert for his warmongering and said they were ashamed to be from the same state as him. What resulted? Being blacklisted from thousands of country radio stations, death threats, and alienation. The Red Cross refused a partnership with them even. No one spoke up for them. It was a tough few years for them, but luckily they came back. But this is still one of the things that the Dixie Chicks will forever be known for. Nipplegate. America is very Puritan in the streets. Here's another early 2000s example of cancel culture. In 2004, Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake performed at the Super Bowl halftime show. The main performer was Janet Jackson. She performed a medley of her hits, and then Justin Timberlake came out and they sang a duet of Rock Your Body. That song being a sexual kind of song, they were dancing provocatively to it. I mean, what were you expecting? There to be room for Jesus? After he sings the line, "I'm gonna have you naked by the end of this song," he pulled off a part of Janet Jackson's costume, revealing her breast covered by a pasty. First off, why are people freaking out? No nipple was even shown, just a bare breast. I mean, wasn't the Victoria's Secret fashion show broadcast with pushed up tits all over the place? What's the big deal? Why is it that I can show as much boob as I want, but as soon as a nipple is shown, that's too far? Why is it that men can go topless, but women can't? I digress. Keep in mind, a large number of Americans aren't logical and they will clutch their pearls at partial nudity and showing a lot of skin. And the incident came to be known as Nipplegate. Over 500,000 Americans made complaints to the FCC. Meanwhile, in Canada, where the Super Bowl was also broadcast live, no one really cared. In fact, there were more complaints about advertising and the lack of Canadian content than there were about Janet Jackson's boob. What were the consequences for Janet Jackson? Being the butt of a lot of jokes, a lawsuit against the performers for apparently traumatizing children, and her music videos and songs being blacklisted. Did Justin Timberlake get cancelled? No. Just another example of misogyny in America. Every time I see these double standards, I sympathize a lot more with feminists and understand why they are so angry at society. Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick is a football player who formerly played for the 49ers. As we all know, 2016 was a crazy year and we still had many of the same problems that we now had under Trump that we did under Obama. Have things really changed that much? No. There was still police brutality then. The Black Lives Matter movement didn't start when Trump was president. No, it actually started during Obama's second term as president. Because America is such a crazy place and is all about patriotism by showing how much you love your country by playing the national anthem before every sporting event and saying the Pledge of Allegiance every day at the beginning of school, rather than, I don't know, looking after its people properly and investing in them with Medicare for all, UBI, and tuition-free university. Athletes are expected to be on the field standing at attention with no head covering and a hand over their heart while the national anthem is sung. Interestingly enough, the requirement for football players to be on the field wasn't in place until 2009. And of course, because America is all about military worship, there are a lot of military events at games. America doesn't treat black people fairly, with the war on drugs and mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex, which is effectively the new Jim Crow, and many black athletes decided to take a knee in protest during the national anthem, and one of them was Colin Kaepernick, who in fact consulted with veterans on his peaceful protest and asked them if it was respectful, and they approved of him doing this. It was a form of peaceful protest and sending a powerful message that they don't agree with what direction the country is going in. America prides itself as a country of freedom and free speech, bro. So why were so many Americans, especially conservatives, throwing a fit and screeching over this? Because conservatives have an obsession with symbolism like neoliberals do, and they can't take any criticism of their country and see that as un-American. Isn't fixing your country and making it better the most patriotic and make America great again thing to do? It's all a virtue signal from the Republicans. They use veterans as a prop and pretend to care about them while refusing them better health care and addressing the toxic culture in the military. What were the consequences for Kaepernick? He was seen as persona non grata in the NFL, and no team would sign him, period, because of him making a political statement. Team owners were being capitalist and didn't want to sign an athlete who mildly challenged the status quo by taking a knee during the national anthem. because they might have faced backlash for bringing him on the team. These team owners are all white, and many of them are Trump supporters. They only care about black people when they shut up, play sports, and make them money. Back in June 2020, Seattle Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll said he regretted not signing Colin Kaepernick, but that's easy to say now because the winds are blowing in another direction, and people see him in a more positive light because he was right about police brutality. Michael Rosenberg of Sports Illustrated said that mainstream white America will reconsider Kaepernick at some point, like they reconsidered the way that they thought of Muhammad Ali after he refused to go to Vietnam, or how they saw Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier in baseball. James Gunn. James Gunn is best known for writing and directing Guardians of the Galaxy and its sequel. Because those movies were successful, Disney was planning on having him write and direct a third movie. Everything seems to be going well for him. Successful guy. However, it was Twitter and right-wing outrage culture that got him cancelled. James Gunn vocally criticized Donald Trump and the alt-right, and that got the attention of Mike Cernovich, who wanted to get back at him, so what did he do? Try to look for anything incriminating to get him cancelled, and as with anyone who has had social media for a decade or more, there's bound to be something that you can read in the most uncharitable way to cancel someone. An easy way of getting revenge. It's funny seeing the right complain about cancel culture, yet they'll cancel people at the blink of an eye. What did Cernovich find? Some dark jokes about subjects that would trigger people. Cernovich got the alt-right to talk about it. And when something goes viral on Twitter, especially when it comes to a public figure employed by a conglomerate, they have to respond, and Disney fired James Gunn. Yes, over a bunch of jokes made years back. Isn't this a bit too far? Actors came to his defense and said it was a bad call for Disney to fire him. A year later, Disney rehired him. I guess because people's attention spans are short, and he was a good director, and Guardians of the Galaxy is super popular, and Disney won't turn down an opportunity to make money. Come on, this is a corporation that opened their parks in Florida during a pandemic. Carlos Dillard, fake Karen. An example of a false accusation and someone taking advantage of a political situation. Carlos Dillard is a known grifter and wannabe actor who is a gay Trump supporter, but he now masquerades as someone who supports social justice, even though he really doesn't. Kind of like Candace Owens. He is known for fabricating and instigating racial incidents and will do this in public. This kind of video got especially popular this year, and dishonest people like Carlos Dillard will weaponize it for their own benefit and to make some money and get their 15 minutes of fame. What he will do is turn on his camera and accuse a person of racism without evidence and gaslight the person, manipulate passersby into agreeing with him with his charm, and weaponize civility, and show the accused Karen's face on camera to get them cancelled and for him to get sympathy points. In the most famous incident that caused him to go viral in June, he was driving and a woman cut him off in traffic and allegedly flipped him off and called him a racial slur. But we don't see this in the video. No, the video starts with him following a woman's car to her flat's parking garage and getting out of the car to confront her, calling her Karen and accusing her of flipping him off, but later accusing her of calling him a slur. Clearly the slur is worse, so if that is true, why didn't he start with that? It's because he's a liar. The woman doesn't know Carlos and is understandably shaken. A common thing that a lot of women experience, especially when going places alone, is being followed, and that can make a woman extremely worried. He escalated the situation by following her home and confronting her. Internet Nancy Drews could find the woman's address, see her car, and figure out who she is and where she lives, and there are a lot of crazies out there who will stalk people. Along with the video, he decided to cash in on the fake Karen incident by making merch and taking profits. He's another Jussie Smollett, and he's ruining it for people who have really been victimized by racists. Luckily for the woman, she never got doxxed that I know of, but I can imagine that this was very traumatizing for her, and perhaps she was freaked out because she was a victim of stalking. If she indeed flipped him off, that's not nice, but let it go. Maybe I'm a bit timid, but there are a lot of crazies out there, and I'm a short, thin person, therefore easy to push over and beat up, so that's why I don't confront people. Being American, I always have that worry that that person could be carrying a gun. Not even my dad, who was a big guy when I was growing up, would get involved and confront anyone. What consequences are there for the cancelled? For rich celebrities, it may not be that bad. Unless you really fuck up like Kevin Spacey, R. Kelly, Bill Cosby, or Harvey Weinstein, and actually harm people. However, that doesn't mean that every single scumbag gets cancelled. Look at Chris Brown. Somehow, he still has a career, and people still work with him. If you're a poor celebrity like, say, Tonya Harding, you get banned from doing what you love, a bit of infamy and notoriety, and told to go back to your day job. If it's just an off-color remark or a meltdown or some sort of controversy where you didn't hurt anyone, Lay low for a bit, spend time in a yoga retreat, make a big donation to charity, and you'll redeem yourself in the public eye. You can afford a publicist who can improve your public image and people move on. You might have to be a little more frugal, but you're not going to be on the street or in the poorhouse. Disgraced TV personalities like Don Cherry and MacLeod are still doing just fine financially, but they don't have their jobs anymore. If you're a multimillionaire and have multiple properties, you can always sell some stocks or that extra holiday home for some extra cash. But for an average person, the consequences can be really severe, socially, financially, and career-wise. People may not want to associate with you. You could lose friends from being cancelled, and families may even cut ties too. Loneliness is bad for mental health. Being cut off from community hurts, especially so if you're from a marginalized group. Financially, you could lose your job, and it's not so easy to get another job, especially because if it's online, the internet never forgets. And as well, at the moment, we are in a pandemic. Even if you do get a reputation management company to help you with search results, employers can do some digging or word gets around, depending on the severity. Is it okay to ruin someone's life forever? Will that make them a better person? Will that bring justice? What is it that you want in the end? The world to be a better place, or the downfall of someone who made a mistake? Does someone cease to be human the minute they do something you don't like? Why is it dangerous? There are many dangers of cancel culture and why it's turned me off. Rather than be vengeful, I'd rather stay true to my easygoing, free spirit self and remember those principles. The first problem I have with cancel culture is the whole promotion of the false idea of once a bigot, always a bigot. I understand if you personally don't want to forgive someone or give them a second chance, but generally speaking, people deserve another chance to redeem themselves. Once a bigot, always a bigot doesn't encourage people to change. It just makes someone throw their hands in the air, give up, and go, oh well, if I'm never going to be good enough, why bother trying to improve myself to impress people who will never be happy with anything I do? Cancel culture puts a chilling effect on freedom of speech and expression. It makes people afraid to discuss topics and disagree because they don't want to be cancelled. Discussion and debate is really important in society, and it helps us move forward and learn more. There's this whole attitude of fuck the police right now, and for good reason. Why should everyone become a cop and police the way that people think and speak? I'm done with this panopticon, where everyone is watching and waiting to see you trip over a laser in that field of lasers that is political discourse on the internet. If we on the left want to be all about rehabilitation, we shouldn't be pro-cancel culture. I find that cancel culture hurts the most marginalized, especially those who are poor. Imagine you're gay, and you were disowned by your family, so you're on your own. You find refuge in your local gay activist scene. Years ago, though, on Twitter, you made edgy jokes before you came out, and those edgy jokes were about gay people. Let's say people from your own scene found out about these tweets that you made when you were younger. If they were cancel hungry, they might shun you and say that you are no longer welcome. Say that happens. Now you don't have a family to turn to, and you lost your one support group. Now what? Sure, this is an extreme hypothetical, but there's a lot of people out there who just want to see someone fall from grace. When someone loses their job and community because of cancel culture, it can open the door to the person being radicalized by bigots and confirm latent prejudices. There's this tendency in certain factions of the left to go, it's not my job to educate you, and be hostile towards people who slightly disagree. But you know where there isn't that much of a tendency, even though people are really, really bad? Right-wing radical groups. They will latch on to people who are cancelled for their own selfish purposes and try to win you over to their side and way of thinking, and they use you. Cancel culture perpetuates at-will employment and disposability culture. We've been seeing an anti-union shift over the decades where unions are busted and being weakened. Neoliberals have taken over, and to please people, they will use identity politics to distract from their union busting and anti-worker positions. Bosses will use any reason to fire or not hire someone. At-will employment and disposability culture is great for businesses because they don't have to keep promoting someone. They can just get rid of people for any reason and use any reason as a cover-up for the real reason. And do you think a little guy can go up against a big corporation? In your dreams. Disposability culture means that your workers start to care less. There's tension in the workplace, less trust, and morale. Why should they care about the company when the company doesn't care about them? When workers are disposable, benefits are cut. Why offer benefits to someone you don't even see as a person? You can't build a relationship with someone that you see as disposable. Cancel culture is a boon for neoliberals to silence people who want to talk about class analysis. Just accuse them of being a class reductionist and a secret racist and denying their white privilege. I mean, nowadays we're starting to see people say that working class is just code word for white. That doesn't even make any sense. This disposability culture can expand to friendships. Sadly, I've seen so many family and friendships break down because of a disagreement over politics, even if it's a really small one. Sometimes I'm afraid to say on other social media that I don't support Biden, because I know that my liberal family and friends will come for me and assume that I must support Trump, who I also loathe. I often find myself biting my tongue and using restraint when I see supposed progressives I follow speak out of both sides of their mouth, calling for racial justice, having Black Lives Matter in their bio, but then saying we need to vote for Biden, who wrote the crime bill and supports the war on drugs, which led to the new Jim Crow. Make it make sense. The other problem is that the internet never forgets. How can someone come back from being cancelled? That will always leave a mark on your record. Even if the accusations are proven to be false, people will always have that little bit of doubt and wonder if you really did do it. Michael Brooks had a very good position on cancel culture, and I liked his nuanced way of thinking about it, and I'll leave links to the videos below. Simply put, cancel culture is rubbish. Peace.